everybody, welcome back to the book of John. I'm so honored that you've made it this far. Today we are on day 16. We are nearly there in our 20-day challenge. The book of John, it's just beautiful. It's got all these layers and it's complex and it's nuanced, and I hope that you've been able to see some of those layers through this study. Today, we're going to work our way from the end. You know, when you read a book and you need to just know how it ends before you go back and read it, that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to start at the end of this chapter. John chapter 16, it has one of my very favorite verses in it, in the whole Bible. It's one of those verses that I sometimes will write in my journal, or I'll put on my mirror in my bathroom with a dry erase marker so I can remember and read it. It starts with Jesus saying this. It says, "I have told you these things so that in me, in Jesus, you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." What I love so much about this verse is how it speaks to both the reality of the world, the trouble. I mean, that's easy for us to name, isn't it? All the trouble that is in our world, all this condition of a broken world, things like war and gun violence and families that are broken apart by conflict or just miscommunication. It talks about pain and cancer and depression. The trouble is easy for us to go see and to name. But then in this verse, it talks about this trouble, these symptoms of a broken world. But then it says that these aren't the end of the chapter, that this isn't the end game, but it's Jesus who overcomes the troubles of this world. It's Jesus that wins. That is the promise of joy and hope that we get to all have. That is all encompassed right here in this beautiful, authentic, and vulnerable verse. When I was pregnant with my first child, I was only 19 years old and I was terrified. I was so scared. And thank God that back then there wasn't the internet, so I could research and Google search all of my fears. I just had this one book, What to Expect When You Are Expecting. But I had only heard stories of the women in my lives, not any of my peers because I was only a teenager, but it was all my aunts and my moms and my older cousins. All those women, they would talk to me about their delivery as terrible. These war stories that we have as women in delivering children into the world. And I couldn't understand at that point in my life why anyone would bother to have more than one child, because it just sounded horrible. And as my due date grew closer, and then as my due date passed, I was so terrified of the pain that was to come. This pain that I had only heard as legend from the women that I knew. And you know what? When that pain came 2 weeks after my due date, that pain, it was awful. It was absolutely the worst. 45 hours of back labor, and the kid came in facing the wrong way, and he weighed a whopping 9 pounds, 11 ounces. I hemorrhaged and almost died and had to get blood. It was terrible. But at the same time, I'd do it all over again. Because when I held Chase Aaron in my arms for the first time, the pain was gone. I couldn't remember the pain. I just remembered the love that I had for him, what it felt like to be a mom and to hold him in my young arms and know that he was mine. And the women I knew, they were right. And I did go on to have 3 more kids in my life. It'll be like childbirth. Jesus doesn't promise us a lifelong faith that is going to be easy, like sugar and roses and happiness and prosperity all the time. Instead, Jesus says it's going to be hard, so hard, but that you're not alone in it. And someday you'll be held in God's arms and realize that pain, that struggle, that hardship, everything that you went through, it was all worth it. Now, I want to be clear. It's not that God gives us these troubles. That is a symptom of a broken world. But it's that God gets us through it. Jesus is clear in chapter 16 that Jesus knows that this stuff is going to happen to him, that some really bad things are going to happen to him, and he's going to be in pain, and this is not going to be good. And this is how Jesus describes it for his disciples. He explains it in verse 7 in this really strange way. He says to his disciples, It is to our advantage that I, Jesus, go away and that the Holy Spirit come and advocate for you and be here on your behalf. He says it's to my advantage that these things are going to happen. It's to your advantage, my disciples, that Jesus is going to be tried, arrested, convicted, and executed. It's to your advantage that Jesus is going to go through the pain of death. I mean, talk about trouble. Then Jesus says this, he says, despite all that, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be better. It's going to work out. It's going to be a good thing. My friends, it's like childbirth. It's like that bad breakup when you thought your heart was never going to recover from. It's like that move that you didn't expect to make. These things, they don't get to overcome us. And sometimes they break us, and sometimes they hurt us in such immeasurable ways. But that's when Jesus goes to the end of the chapter. He says, but take heart, because I, Jesus, am to your advantage. I have overcome the world. Jesus has done this for you and for me. So here's the questions I want you to think about as you dig into chapter 16. Number 1, what troubles do you have that feel overwhelming to you today? And number 2, how does the hope that Jesus promises in John 16 help you to endure that trouble? Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow.